The grand ballroom of the Westmore Hotel glittered with wealth and power. 500 of the world's elite gathered beneath crystal chandeliers, their polite laughter masking the ruthless ambition that had built empires. At the center of it all stood Adrian Cross, heir to the Cross luxury dynasty. His tailored tuxedo and cold smile a perfect armor against the world. His father's words from that morning echoed in his mind. "Tonight you announce your engagement to Vivian Sinclair. The merger with her family's European holdings will secure our legacy for generations." Adrian had nodded, accepting his fate as he always had. Love was irrelevant. Passion was dangerous. Marriage was business, nothing more. But now, as he stood at the podium, 500 expectant faces turned toward him. Something impossible happened. His carefully prepared speech died on his lips. His gaze found her in the crowd. Celine Parker, the art curator who had stormed into his life 3 months ago with her fierce intelligence and unwavering dignity. The woman who had seen through his walls. The woman his family had deemed unsuitable. The woman he had pushed away to protect his inheritance. The woman he couldn't live without. "Ladies and gentlemen," Adrian began, his voice steady despite the chaos in his chest, "I stand before you tonight expected to announce an engagement that would strengthen the Cross Empire." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. His father's expression hardened from the front row. "Instead," Adrian continued, "I'm here to tell you that I've spent 32 years building a fortune while bankrupting my soul." The room fell silent. Cameras flashed. Celine's eyes widened. 3 months ago, I met a woman who showed me that true wealth isn't measured in property portfolios or stock options. It's measured in courage, in integrity, in love. His father rose from his seat, face thunderous. "Adrian, that's enough." But Adrian couldn't stop now. "My entire life I was taught that everything, even who I loved, must serve the family's reputation. I was taught that certain relationships were complicated, that loving a black woman would damage our brand." Gasps echoed through the ballroom. Celine's hand flew to her mouth. "Tonight, I'm choosing love over legacy." Adrian stepped away from the podium, his gaze never leaving Celine. "I'm choosing the woman who taught me that the most valuable thing we possess isn't what we own. It's who we become when we're brave enough to be seen." He extended his hand toward her across the shocked silence. "Celine Parker, I love you. And if you'll have me, I'll spend the rest of my life proving that you're the best decision I ever made." The room erupted in chaos. His father shouted. Cameras flashed frantically. But all Adrian could see was Celine, tears streaming down her face as she moved toward him through the crowd. What happens when the man who built walls around his heart finds them crumbling before the very woman he swore never to love? Hello, my beautiful souls. Welcome back to the chapters of love, where we discover that sometimes the people placed in our path are carrying gifts we never expected to receive. I wonder, where are you listening from tonight? Perhaps you're winding down after a long day, seeking a moment of escape. Maybe you're driving home, lost in thought about your own heart's journey. Or are you curled up somewhere cozy, wondering if the people in your life arrived by chance or design? Wherever you are, I'm so grateful you've chosen to spend this time with me. If you've ever had someone enter your life for one reason but stay for another, tap that like button and share your thoughts below. Your stories become part of our shared tapestry of love and connection. Now, settle in as we discover how the guards around a heart can fall when the right person stands watch. And if you have not subscribed to his chapters of love, kindly comment and tell me what I can do to make you subscribe, my dearest viewer. Adrian Cross was born into privilege so vast it felt like a gilded cage. The Cross name adorned luxury hotels in 27 countries, fashion houses in Milan and Paris, and real estate developments that transformed skylines across continents. From his earliest memories, Adrian understood that he wasn't just a boy. He was an heir, a legacy, a future custodian of empire. His childhood home, a sprawling estate outside London, housed priceless art and antiques but little warmth. His mother, Victoria, was a socialite who treated motherhood as another social obligation, appearing for photographs and charity galas but leaving the actual raising to a rotation of nannies. His father, Richard Cross, was a titan of industry who viewed his son as his greatest investment, one that required rigorous molding. "Emotions are a luxury we cannot afford," Richard would say, his voice crisp and cold as winter air. "Sentiment is for those who lack the strength to build something lasting." At boarding school, Adrian learned to hide his loneliness behind perfect grades and athletic achievements. At university, he mastered the art of charming smiles that never quite reached his eyes. By 25, he was running the North American division of Cross Industries, his reputation for ruthless efficiency earning him the nickname Ice Prince in business circles. Then came Elise, beautiful, sophisticated, and, as he would discover too late, calculating. For 6 months, Adrian believed he had found someone who saw beyond his wealth. For 6 months, he allowed himself to dream of a life where he might actually be loved for himself. The night he planned to propose, he overheard her on the phone with a friend. "Of course I don't love him. But do you have any idea how much a Cross divorce settlement is worth?" The humiliation burned deeper than the betrayal. His father's response, "I told you sentiment was weakness," only confirmed what Adrian had always suspected. Love was a luxury not meant for him. After Elise, Adrian retreated further behind his walls. He dated casually, always with women his father deemed suitable, daughters of business partners, European aristocrats, models who understood the arrangement was temporary. He never stayed the night. He never made promises. And he certainly never fell in love. Especially not with women his father considered complications. Richard Cross had never explicitly forbidden interracial relationships, but his subtle comments made his views clear. "The Cross brand represents tradition, Adrian. Certain choices create unnecessary challenges." Adrian told himself he was being practical, not prejudiced. He was protecting the empire, protecting himself, until the night fate led him to a small art gallery in Chelsea, where a woman's passionate words about a forgotten painting would begin to dismantle everything he thought he knew. Celine Parker grew up in a modest brownstone in Brooklyn, where the walls were lined with books instead of priceless art, and dinner conversations revolved around ideas rather than acquisitions. Her father, James, taught history at a local high school, infusing his lessons with such vivid storytelling that students would linger after class just to hear more. Her mother, Diana, worked night shifts as a hospital nurse, her gentle hands healing bodies while her unwavering spirit healed hearts. What the Parker home lacked in luxury, it made up for in laughter, music, and the rich tapestry of their shared heritage. Diana's grandmother had been a celebrated Harlem Renaissance poet, while James's father had marched with Dr. King. Their stories, of struggle and triumph, of dignity in the face of discrimination, shaped Celine's understanding of beauty and resilience. "Art isn't just pretty pictures, sweetheart," her father would say during their Sunday visits to museums. "It's how we preserve our humanity when the world tries to take it away." Celine's eye for beauty and meaning led her to study art history at NYU, working 3 jobs to cover what her scholarships didn't. Her professors recognized her rare gift, the ability to look at a painting and see not just technique but the human story behind the canvas. By 28, she had worked her way up from gallery assistant to curator at the small but respected Meridian Gallery in Chelsea, specializing in overlooked artists from marginalized communities. Her personal life had been less successful. Marcus, her college boyfriend, had initially supported her ambitions but grew increasingly resentful of her dedication to her work. "You're chasing pipe dreams," he'd said during their final argument. "All this passion about art that nobody cares about. You need to be realistic." 2 weeks later, he was dating a law student with practical goals. The betrayal left Celine wary but undeterred. She poured herself into her work, determined to create spaces where forgotten voices could be heard. Her latest exhibition, Unseen, Portraits of Dignity, featured works by Black artists spanning 3 centuries, including a recently discovered portrait of a woman who had escaped slavery only to become a celebrated seamstress for New York's elite. It was this exhibition that would bring Adrian Cross into her orbit, a collision of worlds that neither was prepared for. Adrian's mornings began with his personal assistant delivering a pressed suit and a detailed schedule of meetings worth millions. Breakfast was prepared by a private chef and eaten alone while reviewing market reports. His penthouse overlooking Central Park was featured in architectural magazines but felt more like a hotel than a home, impeccable, impressive, and impersonal. Celine's mornings started with yoga on a worn mat in her small apartment, followed by strong coffee and classical music. Her clothes were chosen for comfort and self-expression rather than status. Her modest one-bedroom in Brooklyn was filled with books, plants, and treasures from flea markets, each item chosen with care and imbued with meaning. Adrian moved through exclusive clubs and boardrooms where people spoke in careful euphemisms and calculated smiles. Success was measured in acquisitions and influence. Relationships were strategic alliances. Celine's world centered around gallery openings and cozy dinners with fellow artists and academics. Conversations flowed freely, passionate and unfiltered. Success meant creating moments of genuine connection and understanding. Relationships were built on shared values and mutual growth. These parallel lives, one of pristine luxury, one of authentic simplicity, were never meant to intersect, until they did. The Meridian Gallery was buzzing with anticipation for the opening of Unseen, Portraits of Dignity. Celine moved through the space, making final adjustments to lighting and placements, her emerald dress a deliberate choice to complement the rich tones of the historical portraits. Adrian Cross arrived precisely 30 minutes after the official start time, late enough to make an entrance, early enough to fulfill his obligation and leave. His company's charitable foundation had provided funding for the exhibition, a tax write-off his CFO had recommended. Art was not his passion, merely another asset class in his diversified portfolio. Their first interaction was brief and unremarkable. A polite introduction, a firm handshake, a practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes. Celine noted his expensive watch and distant gaze, categorizing him as another wealthy patron more interested in appearances than art. Adrian observed her poise and passion, filing her away as another idealistic creative with more talent than business sense. The spark came later, as Celine gave a short talk about the centerpiece of the exhibition, the portrait of Harriet James, a formerly enslaved woman who had built a successful dressmaking business in 1850s New York. "What makes this portrait revolutionary," Celine explained to the gathered crowd, "isn't just its technical brilliance. It's that in an era when black women were either invisible or caricatured, the artist captured Harriet's dignity, her intelligence, her humanity. She isn't smiling to please the viewer. She isn't posing to fulfill expectations. She simply exists, commanding respect through her very presence." From his position at the back of the room, Adrian found himself unexpectedly moved. There was something in the portrait's subject, a quiet strength and uncompromising self-possession, that resonated with him, and something in the curator's words that cut through his practiced indifference. As the crowd dispersed, Adrian found himself lingering before the portrait. "It's just a painting," he murmured, more to himself than anyone else. "Why would anyone risk everything for art?" Celine, passing behind him, paused. "For the same reason people risk everything for love, Mr. Cross. Because some things matter more than safety." Adrian turned, surprised by both her boldness and her insight. "You assume I've never taken risks. I assume anyone who dismisses art as just a painting has forgotten how to see with their heart instead of their portfolio." Her words were challenging, but her tone was thoughtful rather than accusatory. "And you assume everyone has the luxury of following their heart," he countered, something in her directness compelling his honesty. "Some of us have responsibilities that don't allow for such indulgences." Celine studied him, seeing beyond the tailored suit to the tension in his shoulders, the careful control in his posture. "That sounds lonely, Mr. Cross." For a moment, Adrian's mask slipped, revealing a flash of vulnerability that surprised them both. Then the wall came back up, his expression cooling. "Loneliness is another luxury I can't afford. Enjoy your exhibition, Ms. Parker." I'm sure it will be enlightening for those who appreciate such things." He turned to leave, but Celine's voice stopped him once more. "The Foundation's check may have your name on it, Mr. Cross, but I think you're the one who received a gift tonight." Adrian left without responding, unsettled by her perception and his own unexpected reaction. For the first time in years, someone had seen past his carefully constructed facade, and rather than feeling exposed, he felt strangely seen. Celine watched him go, intrigued despite herself by the glimpse of authenticity beneath his polished exterior. She had encountered many wealthy patrons before, but something about Adrian Cross suggested depths that his world rarely allowed him to reveal. Neither realized that this brief exchange had planted seeds that would grow into something neither was prepared for, a connection that would challenge everything they thought they knew about themselves and each other. 3 days after the gallery opening, Adrian found himself doing something unprecedented, searching for information about Celine Parker. Not through his usual channels of private investigators or corporate intelligence, but through simple internet searches, reading her curator statements, watching interviews where she discussed overlooked artists with infectious passion. He told himself it was professional curiosity. The Cross Foundation funded dozens of cultural initiatives. Understanding the people behind them was just good business. Yet he couldn't explain why her words at the gallery had lingered in his mind, challenging his carefully constructed worldview. When an invitation arrived for a lecture series at the Metropolitan Museum, featuring Celine as a guest speaker, Adrian surprised his assistant by clearing his schedule for the evening. The lecture hall was crowded with art enthusiasts and academics. Adrian chose a seat near the back, his presence unannounced and unexpected. When Celine took the stage, her confidence was magnetic. She wore a simple burgundy dress that complemented her warm brown skin, her natural hair framing her face like a crown. Her hands moved expressively as she spoke about art as resistance, as cultural memory, as healing. Halfway through her presentation, her gaze swept across the audience and caught on Adrian. For a brief moment, surprise flickered across her features before she recovered, continuing her talk without missing a beat. But something had shifted in the air between them, an awareness, an electricity. Throughout the remainder of her lecture, Adrian noticed how her eyes would occasionally find his in the crowd, a silent acknowledgement of his unexpected presence. Each time their gazes connected, something tightened in his chest, a sensation both unfamiliar and exhilarating. After the applause and the formal Q&A, Adrian lingered at the edges of the small reception, watching as Celine engaged with admirers and colleagues. She was in her element here, genuine and animated in a way that made the practiced social smiles around her seem hollow by comparison. When she finally approached him, her expression was curious rather than impressed by his status, a refreshing change from what he was accustomed to. "Mr. Cross, I didn't expect to see you here. Adrian, please." He offered her a glass of champagne from a passing tray. "Your lecture was illuminating. High praise from someone who thinks art is just paintings." Her tone was teasing rather than accusatory, a small smile playing at the corners of her lips. "Perhaps I'm reconsidering my position." He took a sip of his champagne, studying her over the rim of his glass. "Your perspective is compelling. Compelling enough to attend a lecture on a Thursday evening. I'm honored." She tilted her head slightly. "Though I suspect the Cross Foundation doesn't typically send its CEO to evaluate every grant recipient." Adrian found himself smiling, a genuine smile that felt foreign on his face. "Consider it personal interest rather than professional oversight." Something flickered in her eyes, wariness perhaps, or intrigue. Personal interest in art, or in the curator? The directness of her question caught him off guard. In his world, people spoke in layers of subtext and polite evasion. Celine Parker, it seemed, had no patience for such games. "Both," he admitted, surprising himself with his honesty. "Though I'm still forming opinions on each." Celine laughed, the sound warm and genuine. "Well, when you've reached your conclusions, Mr. Cross, Adrian, I'd be interested to hear them." She glanced at a colleague, signaling to her from across the room. "If you'll excuse me, duty calls." As she walked away, Adrian realized he was already planning how to see her again. Over the following weeks, Adrian created a series of increasingly transparent pretexts to cross paths with Celine. First, it was a formal follow-up meeting about the Foundation's grant, a meeting he insisted on attending personally, much to his staff's confusion. Then came an invitation to consult on art for the lobby of a new Cross hotel in Manhattan, a task typically delegated to his interior design team. Each encounter revealed new facets of Celine that fascinated him. Her encyclopedic knowledge of art history, her quick wit, the way she stood her ground when they disagreed, unintimidated by his position or reputation, the subtle fragrance of jasmine that lingered when she left a room. 3 weeks after the lecture, Adrian arrived at the Meridian Gallery unannounced, carrying a leather portfolio case. Celine looked up from her desk, surprise evident in her expression. "Adrian, I don't believe we had a meeting scheduled." "We didn't." He placed the portfolio on her desk. "But I came across something I thought might interest you." Inside was a rare first-edition book of poetry by Georgia Douglas Johnson, a prominent figure of the Harlem Renaissance. Celine's fingers hovered over it reverently, her eyes wide. "This is extraordinary. These are nearly impossible to find." She looked up at him, genuinely moved. "How did you know?" Adrian shrugged, attempting nonchalance despite the warmth spreading through him at her reaction. "You mentioned her influence during your lecture. I happened to see this at an auction and thought of you." What he didn't mention was the hours he'd spent researching Harlem Renaissance poets after her lecture, or the private auction he'd specifically attended to acquire this gift. "Happened to see it at an auction," Celine repeated, a knowing smile playing at her lips. "Of course." She carefully turned the pages, her expression softening. "Thank you. This is thoughtful in a way I wouldn't have expected." "You mean from someone who thinks art is just paintings?" He quoted her earlier words, a rare playfulness entering his tone. "Exactly." She studied him with new interest. "You're full of surprises, Adrian Cross." "As are you, Celine Parker." The way he said her name, like something precious, something savored, sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. Their next encounter came during a charity gala at the Natural History Museum. Adrian spotted Celine across the crowded room, engaged in animated conversation with an elderly artist he recognized from his research. She wore a midnight blue gown that left one shoulder bare. Her hair swept up to reveal the elegant line of her neck. Throughout the evening, he found his attention repeatedly drawn to her, even as he performed his expected role of charming potential donors. Occasionally, he would catch her glancing his way, their eyes meeting briefly before one of them looked away. It was near midnight when he finally made his way to her side, finding her alone by a display of gemstones, the blue sapphires complementing her gown. "They pale in comparison," he said quietly, nodding toward the jewels. Celine turned, a smile touching her lips. "Careful, Mr. Cross." That sounded dangerously close to flirtation. "Would that be so terrible?" He moved closer, the space between them charged with unspoken tension. "It would be complicated." Her voice was soft but firm. "We come from different worlds. At this moment we're in the same one." He gestured to the room around them, then back to the space between them. "Right here." A slight shiver passed through her, though the room was warm. Adrian noticed immediately. "You're cold." Before she could protest, he was removing his jacket and draping it gently over her shoulders. The gesture was simple, almost old-fashioned, but the moment his hands brushed against her bare skin, something electric passed between them. His fingers lingered a fraction longer than necessary, and Celine's breath caught audibly. "Thank you," she murmured, the jacket enveloping her in warmth and his subtle cologne, sandalwood and something uniquely him. What began as curiosity was evolving into something deeper, something that increasingly unsettled Adrian's carefully ordered existence. He found himself thinking of Celine at unexpected moments, during board meetings, while reviewing contracts, in the quiet hours before dawn when sleep eluded him. It wasn't just her beauty that captivated him, though that was undeniable. It was her integrity, her passion, her refusal to be impressed by the trappings of wealth that usually granted him immediate deference. In a world where everyone wanted something from him, Celine Parker seemed content with who she was and what she had. For Celine, the growing attraction was equally confusing. Adrian represented everything she had learned to be wary of: privilege, power, a world that often valued appearance over substance. Yet beneath his polished exterior, she glimpsed moments of genuine curiosity, unexpected kindness, and a loneliness that mirrored her own in ways she hadn't anticipated. Their conversations grew longer, deeper. Over coffee at a small cafe near her gallery, where Adrian looked endearingly out of place among the artistic crowd, they debated the purpose of art, the nature of privilege, the possibility of change. During a private tour of a new exhibition, arranged by Adrian through connections she pretended to be unimpressed by, they shared stories of their childhoods, discovering unexpected parallels in their different worlds. "My father believes relationships should serve the family's interests," Adrian admitted one evening as they walked through Central Park, the setting sun casting long shadows across their path. "Marriages are mergers, children are heirs, emotions are liabilities." "That sounds like a lonely way to live," Celine said softly. Adrian was quiet for a moment. "It is. But it's all I've known. Until now." The question hung between them, laden with meaning. Adrian stopped walking, turning to face her. "Until you." The simple honesty of his words caught them both by surprise. The first time Adrian almost kissed Celine was in the quiet back room of her gallery, surrounded by paintings waiting to be hung for a new exhibition. She had been explaining the significance of a particular piece, her hands moving expressively, her eyes alight with passion. Adrian found himself watching her lips as she spoke, mesmerized by their fullness, the way they curved around certain words. When she paused, noticing his intense gaze, the air between them thickened with unspoken desire. "Adrian!" Her voice was barely above a whisper. He moved closer, one hand rising to gently brush a strand of hair from her face. His fingers lingered against her cheek, warm and slightly rough against her smooth skin. Celine's pulse quickened, her breath catching as he leaned in, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his breath against her lips. For a suspended moment, they stood on the precipice of something neither was prepared for. Then the sharp ring of Adrian's phone shattered the silence, pulling them reluctantly back to reality. The almost kiss lingered between them, unacknowledged but unforgotten, adding a new layer of tension to their interactions. When their hands accidentally brushed while examining a sculpture, Celine felt heat rush to her cheeks. When Adrian helped her into his car after a late dinner, his hand at the small of her back sent electricity through her body. For Adrian, these moments of near connection were both exhilarating and terrifying. He found himself thinking of her at night, imagining the softness of her lips, the warmth of her skin against his. Desires he had long suppressed were awakening, challenging the control he prided himself on. One rainy evening, after accompanying Celine to an artist's studio in Brooklyn, they found themselves caught in a sudden downpour. Laughing, they ran for shelter under the awning of a closed bookshop, rain soaking through their clothes despite their efforts. "You're drenched," Adrian observed, his voice husky as he took in the sight of her, raindrops clinging to her eyelashes, her blouse clinging to her curves. "So are you," Celine replied, equally affected by the way his wet shirt revealed the contours of his chest, the usually perfect hair now tousled and falling across his forehead. Without thinking, she reached up to brush the hair from his eyes. The moment her fingers touched his skin, something shifted between them. Adrian's gaze darkened, dropping to her lips with unmistakable intent. This time, when he leaned in, there was no interruption. His lips met hers in a kiss that began gently but quickly deepened with weeks of pent-up longing. Celine's hands moved to his chest, feeling his heart racing beneath her palms. Adrian's arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer until there was no space left between them. The kiss was everything they had imagined and more, tender yet passionate, cautious yet consuming. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless, the world around them momentarily forgotten. "I've been wanting to do that since the moment I saw you," Adrian admitted, his forehead resting against hers. Celine smiled, her heart full. "What took you so long?" As they stood together in the rain-washed night, neither spoke of the complications that awaited them, the worlds that would collide, the choices that would need to be made. For now, it was enough to have crossed the distance between them, to acknowledge the connection that had been building since that first night at the gallery. But reality was waiting, and sooner than either expected, it would demand its due. The Westmore Gallery's annual Emerging Voices exhibition was one of the most prestigious showcases for new talent in the city. For months, Celine had worked tirelessly to secure a spot for Jamal Washington, a brilliant young artist whose powerful work on urban displacement deserved recognition. Tonight was supposed to be a triumph. Jamal's art prominently displayed, critics and collectors in attendance, a potential breakthrough moment. Instead, it was unraveling before her eyes. "I'm sorry, Ms. Parker, but there's been a change in the exhibition layout," Marcus Westmore, the gallery owner's son and newly appointed director, informed her with barely concealed satisfaction. "We've had to relocate Mr. Washington's pieces to the back corridor." Celine stared at him in disbelief. "The back corridor? That's where you put student work and experimental pieces." "We had an agreement. Front gallery, north wall." Marcus adjusted his glasses with manicured fingers. "Plans change. We received a last-minute submission from Eliza Harrington. Surely you understand that the daughter of Senator Harrington takes precedence over your discovery." The condescension in his voice made Celine's blood boil. This wasn't about artistic merit. It was about connections, about maintaining the status quo. It was everything she had fought against throughout her career. "Jamal's work is extraordinary," she argued, keeping her voice steady despite her rising anger. "The critics who previewed it last week agreed. Moving him to the back corridor is a business decision," Marcus interrupted smoothly. "One that's already been made. If you'd like to continue your relationship with Westmore Gallery, I suggest you accept it gracefully." The implied threat was clear. Push back and doors would close, not just for Jamal, but for all the underrepresented artists Celine championed. She swallowed her pride, nodding stiffly before walking away to break the news to Jamal. The young artist took it better than she had, his quiet dignity in the face of the slight only making Celine feel worse. "It's not your fault," he assured her. "We both know how this world works." But knowing didn't make it easier. As the evening progressed, Celine maintained a professional smile while seething internally. She watched as mediocre work by connected artists received effusive praise, while visitors had to be directed down a poorly lit hallway to find Jamal's powerful canvases. The final blow came during Marcus's opening speech, when he thanked the diverse voices represented in the exhibition, without naming a single one of the artists of color whose work had been relegated to the margins. The performative inclusion without actual equity was so transparent that Celine had to step outside to keep from causing a scene. In the quiet courtyard behind the gallery, she finally let her composure slip. Angry tears threatened at the corners of her eyes as she paced, her hands clenched into fists. This was the reality of her world. No matter how talented her artists, no matter how hard she worked, the system was designed to keep certain voices centered and others peripheral. "Celine." She turned, hastily wiping at her eyes, to find Adrian standing in the doorway. He was impeccable as always in a charcoal suit, concern evident in his expression. "Adrian, I didn't know you were here." She straightened, attempting to recover her professional demeanor. "The foundation sponsors the exhibition." He moved closer, studying her face. "What happened?" For a moment, Celine considered brushing it off, offering the polite fiction that everything was fine. But something in Adrian's genuine concern broke through her defenses. "They moved Jamal's work to the back hallway to make room for a senator's daughter," she admitted, the words bitter on her tongue. "His art is brilliant, challenging, important, And they've hidden it away because he doesn't have the right connections or background. Adrian was quiet for a moment. Show me. The simple request surprised her. What? Show me his work. Adrian's expression was unreadable, but his eyes were intent. Please. Celine led him through the crowded gallery to the dimly lit back corridor where Jamal's paintings hung. Despite the poor placement, the power of the work was undeniable. Vibrant, emotional canvases depicting communities displaced by luxury developments, families caught between gentrification and erasure. Adrian stood before them in silence, taking in each piece with careful attention. Finally, he turned to Celine. These are extraordinary. I know, she said softly. That's why it's so infuriating. Art like this deserves to be seen, to challenge people, to make them think. Instead, it's treated as an afterthought while mediocre work gets prime placement because of who created it. This happens often? Adrian asked, his tone carefully neutral. Celine laughed without humor. All the time. The art world loves to talk about diversity and inclusion, but when it comes to actually giving space and recognition to marginalized voices, the doors stay closed unless you have the right name, the right connections, the right... Look. She glanced at him, suddenly aware of who she was talking to. I'm sorry. I shouldn't be dumping this on you. Why not? Adrian's question was genuine. Because I'm part of the system you're criticizing. Aren't you? The words slipped out before she could stop them. Instead of taking offense, Adrian nodded slowly. Yes, him. Which means I should be aware of how that system works and fails. He gestured to the paintings. This artist, Jamal, he deserves better than this. The simple acknowledgement, free of defensiveness or platitudes, touched Celine deeply. For the first time, she felt truly seen, not just as a woman he was attracted to, but as a professional fighting battles he had never had to face. Thank you, she said quietly, for seeing it, for not dismissing it. Adrian's expression softened. I'm learning to see many things I was blind to before. His gaze held hers. Because of you. The moment stretched between them, intimate despite their public surroundings. Then Adrian's phone buzzed with a message. He glanced at it, his expression shifting to one of determination. I need to make a call. Will you wait for me? There's something I want to discuss with you. Curious, Celine nodded. Adrian stepped away, phone to his ear, his voice too low for her to hear. When he returned several minutes later, there was a new energy about him. Walk with me, he asked, offering his arm. Outside, the spring evening was mild, the streets quieter away from the gallery district. They walked in comfortable silence for a block before Adrian spoke. The Cross Foundation is launching a new initiative next month, supporting independent galleries that feature underrepresented artists. He glanced at her. We need a curator to help select the recipients and oversee the program. Someone with expertise, passion, and a commitment to equity in the arts. Celine stopped walking, turning to face him. Adrian, are you offering me a job? I'm offering you a platform, he corrected gently. To do on a larger scale what you've been fighting to do, one artist at a time. Full creative control, substantial funding, no interference from the board, which I chair, by the way. Celine studied him, emotions warring within her. You created this position. Because of tonight? I accelerated plans that were already in discussion, Adrian admitted. But yes, seeing your frustration, seeing that artist's work hidden away, it clarified things for me. He took her hands in his touch sending warmth through her despite the evening chill. You were right that first night at your gallery. Art isn't just paintings or tax write-offs. It's how we preserve our humanity. It's how we see each other. The sincerity in his voice moved her deeply. This wasn't charity or an attempt to impress her. It was genuine understanding, a desire to use his position to create change. I don't know what to say, she whispered. Say you'll consider it. His thumbs traced gentle circles on her palms. Not because of whatever is happening between us, but because you're exactly the person who should be leading this." Celine looked up at him, seeing beyond the powerful CEO to the man beneath, a man who was learning to see the world through new eyes, who was willing to use his privilege to open doors rather than reinforce walls. "Whatever is happening between us," she repeated softly. "What exactly is that, Adrian?" His gaze dropped to her lips, then back to her eyes. "Something I've never felt before. Something that terrifies me and exhilarates me in equal measure." The honesty of his admission broke the last of her resistance. Celine moved closer, her hands sliding up to rest against his chest. "It terrifies me too." Adrian's arms encircled her waist, drawing her against him. "Tell me to stop," he murmured, his face inches from hers. "I don't want you to stop," she whispered back. Their lips met in a kiss that was tentative at first, then deepened with a hunger neither had allowed themselves to fully acknowledge until this moment. Celine's hands moved to his shoulders, then to the nape of his neck, fingers threading through his hair. Adrian held her as if she were precious, one hand at the small of her back, the other cradling her face. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless, the world around them momentarily forgotten. Adrian rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed as if savoring the moment. "I've wanted to do that since the first time you challenged me," he admitted, his voice husky. Celine smiled, her heart full. "I've wanted you to since the night you brought me that book of poetry." They stood together in the gentle spring night, the kiss a threshold crossed, a new chapter beginning. Neither spoke of the complications that awaited them, the different worlds they inhabited, the expectations they would defy, the judgments they would face. For now, it was enough to have found each other, to recognize the connection that had been building since that first night at the gallery. What they didn't see was the figure watching from the shadows across the street, Vivian Sinclair, daughter of Richard Cross's oldest friend and the woman Adrian's father had been grooming as a suitable match for his son. Her perfectly manicured nails dug into her palms as she observed the intimate moment, her lips thinning into a line of cold fury. By morning, Richard Cross would know exactly what, and who, had captured his son's attention. The battle lines were being drawn, though Adrian and Celine, lost in each other's eyes, were blissfully unaware of the storm gathering on the horizon. Their secret romance had begun. But secrets in Adrian's world had a way of becoming weapons in the right hands, or the wrong ones. The Cross family estate outside London sprawled across 50 acres of manicured gardens and ancient oaks. The main house, a Georgian mansion that had graced the covers of architectural magazines, stood as a monument to old money and careful curation. Inside, every object told a story of power, from the ancestral portraits lining the grand staircase to the rare antiques positioned just so in rooms designed to impress rather than welcome. Adrian had always found the place suffocating. Today, summoned unexpectedly by his father, the air felt particularly thick with unspoken expectations. Richard Cross stood at the window of his study, back straight, hands clasped behind him, a posture Adrian had unconsciously mimicked throughout his corporate career. At 65, Richard remained imposing, his silver hair and tailored suit projecting authority without effort. He didn't turn when Adrian entered, a deliberate power play they both recognized. "You've been busy in New York," Richard said finally. His voice clipped with the British accent he had maintained despite decades in America. Though not, it seems, with company business. Adrian kept his expression neutral, though his pulse quickened. The Cross Foundation's New Arts Initiative has significant PR value. "I'd call that company business." Richard turned, his steel-gray eyes, so like Adrian's own, cold with disapproval. "Don't insult my intelligence." He moved to his desk, picking up a manila folder. Celine Parker, 31, art curator at the Meridian Gallery, daughter of James Parker, high school history teacher, and Diana Parker, nurse at Brooklyn Methodist. He dropped the folder on the desk. "Hardly the connections we look for in the Cross circle." The dossier, compiled so quickly, so thoroughly, sent a chill through Adrian. Of course his father would have him followed. Of course, there would be photographs, reports, background checks. Privacy was another luxury the Cross name didn't afford. "I wasn't aware I needed your approval for my friendships," Adrian replied, his tone deliberately light despite the tension coiling in his chest. "Friendships?" Richard's laugh was sharp, humorless. "Is that what you call it?" He opened the folder, revealing photographs. Adrian and Celine walking in Central Park, dining at a small restaurant in the village, kissing on a moonlit street. "Your mother is devastated." Adrian doubted that. Victoria Cross's primary emotions were social ambition and mild ennui. But he remained silent, unwilling to give his father the reaction he sought. "You've always been headstrong, Adrian. It's what makes you effective in business." Richard's tone shifted to one of calculated reasonableness. "But this infatuation has gone far enough. The Sinclair merger depends on your relationship with Vivian. The board expects an announcement by quarter's end." "There is no relationship with Vivian," Adrian stated flatly. "And I wasn't aware my personal life was subject to board approval. Everything bearing the Cross name is subject to consideration of its impact on our brand." Richard's voice hardened. "You've had your fun. Now it's time to remember your responsibilities." Adrian felt a familiar pressure building, the weight of expectation, of duty, of a legacy he had never asked for but had been groomed to protect. For the first time, he allowed himself to question whether the empire was worth the cost. "And if I choose to continue seeing Celine?" Richard's expression darkened. "Then you choose to face the consequences." He moved closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous quiet. "The Parker family seems vulnerable. The mother works at a hospital where we have significant interests. The father teaches at a school that depends on private donations. The Meridian Gallery leases space in a building recently acquired by Cross Properties." The threat was unmistakable. Adrian's hands clenched at his sides, rage building at the casual cruelty of his father's tactics. "You would destroy innocent people's livelihoods over this? I would protect this family's interests by any means necessary." Richard's gaze was unflinching. "As I've always done. As you've benefited from your entire life. This isn't protection. It's control. Call it what you will." Richard returned to his desk, the conversation clearly over in his mind. "You have a choice to make, Adrian. Your birthright and the security of those you claim to care about, or a fleeting romance that was never going to last. I expect your decision by the end of the week." Adrian left without another word, the familiar halls of his childhood home suddenly feeling like a prison. In the car back to London, he stared out at the passing countryside, his father's threats echoing in his mind. The rational part of him, the part shaped by years of cross-training, calculated the costs. His position, his inheritance, his identity as his father's son. But another voice, one that sounded remarkably like Celine's, asked a different question. What was it all worth if he couldn't choose his own path? If he couldn't love freely? For the first time in his life, Adrian Cross didn't have a strategic answer. Across the Atlantic, Celine was experiencing her own moment of reckoning. The call had come that morning, an invitation to meet Victoria Cross for tea at the Pembroke Hotel. Curiosity had overcome caution, leading Celine to this opulent setting where Adrian's mother now studied her with the detached interest one might give an unusual specimen. Victoria was elegant in that effortless way of women who had never questioned their place in the world. Her blonde hair was swept into a perfect chignon, her Chanel suit impeccable, her smile practiced but never reaching her eyes. "You must be wondering why I asked you here," Victoria began, stirring her tea with a silver spoon that probably cost more than Celine's monthly rent. "I'll be direct. My son has always had phases. Rebellions against his father's expectations. You, my dear, are simply the latest." Celine kept her expression composed despite the insult. "With respect, Mrs. Cross, I don't think you know anything about my relationship with Adrian. I know my son." Victoria's smile tightened. And I know he will eventually remember who he is and what he owes to his family name. The question is how much damage will be done before that happens. Damage, Celine repeated, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Victoria sighed, as if explaining something to a child. Adrian is the heir to a global empire. His choices affect thousands of employees, shareholders, partners. His marriage, when it comes, will be an alliance that strengthens the cross position. Surely you understand that your background makes you unsuitable for such a role. The word stung, not because Celine harbored illusions about marrying into the Cross dynasty, but because they reduced her to nothing more than her background, a convenient label that ignored everything she was as a person. My background, Celine echoed, meeting Victoria's gaze directly. You mean the color of my skin, my lack of family connections, the fact that my parents worked for their living instead of inheriting it. Victoria had the grace to look momentarily discomfited. I mean the practical realities of our world. Adrian lives in the public eye. His choices are scrutinized. A relationship like this would create complications. For whom? Celine challenged. For Adrian. Or for you and Mr. Cross? For everyone involved. Victoria's tone cooled further. Including you. The press can be cruel, Ms. Parker. They will dig into every aspect of your life, your family's lives. Every flaw, every mistake, every private moment exposed and dissected. Is that what you want for your parents? For yourself? The threat was veiled but clear. Celine thought of her father, whose quiet dignity had guided her throughout her life. Of her mother, whose hands had healed countless patients while still finding time to braid her daughter's hair each morning. The idea of them being subjected to tabloid scrutiny, to cruel speculation, to the racism that often lurked beneath polite society's surface. It was unbearable. And then there's your career, Victoria continued, pressing her advantage. You've built something admirable at the Meridian. Would be ashamed to see it compromised by accusations of leveraging personal relationships for professional gain. Celine's teacup clattered against its saucer as she set it down with more force than intended. I've never used Adrian's position for my own benefit. Perception matters more than reality in our world, my dear. Victoria's smile was almost pitying. You're an intelligent woman. Surely you see that this can only end one way. The question is how much pain will be inflicted before we reach that inevitable conclusion. As Celine left the hotel, the spring sunshine seemed dimmer, the city noise more jarring. Victoria's words had planted seeds of doubt that took root despite her efforts to dismiss them. Was she being selfish, pursuing this relationship when it could hurt so many people, including Adrian himself? The question haunted her as she returned to her apartment, as she tried to focus on work, as she waited for Adrian's call that evening. When it came, his voice was strained, though he tried to hide it. My father knows, he said without preamble. I've been summoned and warned. Celine closed her eyes, Victoria's words echoing in her mind. Your mother paid me a similar courtesy today. What? Adrian's shock was evident. Celine, I'm so sorry. I had no idea she would. It's all right, she interrupted, though it wasn't. It was illuminating. A heavy silence fell between them, filled with unspoken fears and questions. This changes nothing, Adrian said finally, determination in his voice. My parents don't dictate my life or my choices. But Celine heard the cost in his words, the strain of standing against a lifetime of expectations. Adrian, what exactly are we doing? Where is this going? I don't know, he admitted, his honesty both painful and precious. I just know that when I'm with you, I feel more myself than I ever have. I know that the thought of not seeing you again is unbearable. The raw emotion in his voice brought tears to her eyes. Your father threatened my family, didn't he? Adrian's silence was answer enough. And your mother made it clear that my career, my reputation, my parents' privacy, all of it is at risk. Celine took a deep breath, steadying herself for what she needed to say. Adrian, we need to be realistic. Your world and mine, they don't easily intersect. The cost of trying to force them together might be too high. Don't say that. Adrian's voice was urgent now. We can find a way. I can protect you, your family. At what cost? Celine asked softly. Your inheritance. Your position. Everything you've worked for. None of that matters if... It does matter, she interrupted gently. It's part of who you are. And I would never ask you to choose between your family and me. Celine, please. Me see you. We can talk about this in person. She closed her eyes, knowing that if she saw him, her resolve would crumble. I think we both need time to think clearly, to consider what's really at stake. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken words and emotions too complex to name. Finally, Adrian spoke, his voice tight with controlled pain. Promise me you won't make any decisions without talking to me first. Promise me that much. I promise, she whispered, though her heart was already breaking with the decision forming in her mind. 3 days later, they met in Central Park as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Celine had chosen a public place deliberately, somewhere they couldn't touch, couldn't kiss, couldn't lose themselves in the connection that made everything else seem distant and manageable. Adrian looked exhausted, shadows beneath his eyes suggesting sleepless nights that matched her own. When he reached for her hand, she stepped back, maintaining the distance she needed to say what must be said. I can't do this, Adrian. The words hung between them, sharp and final. Adrian's expression shifted from hope to disbelief to a pain so raw it nearly broke her resolve. Because of my parents. Celine, I told you I can handle them. I can protect you. It's not just about protection. She wrapped her arms around herself, as if physically holding together her breaking heart. It's about reality. Your world has rules, expectations. Fighting them would cost you everything you've built. Let it, Adrian said fiercely. None of it matters compared to... To what? Celine challenged gently. To me. Adrian, we've known each other for months, not years. What happens when the excitement of defying your family fades? When the reality of what you've sacrificed sinks in? When you look at me and see the reason you lost your birthright? That would never happen, he insisted, stepping closer despite her retreat. Celine, what I feel for you, it's not a phase or a rebellion. It's real. I believe you, she said softly, tears threatening despite her determination to remain composed. And that's why I have to walk away now, before we destroy each other and everyone around us. Adrian's face paled. You don't mean that. I do. The words cost her everything to say. Your parents were right about one thing, we come from different worlds. Trying to bridge them would hurt too many people, including us. Celine, please. His voice broke, the control he prided himself on fracturing before her eyes. She shook her head, tears now falling freely. I'm sorry, Adrian. Truly. But this is goodbye. Before he could respond, before her resolve could crumble completely, Celine turned and walked away. Each step felt like moving through quicksand, her body fighting the decision her mind had made. She didn't look back, couldn't bear to see the pain she knew would be written across his face, pain that mirrored the agony tearing through her own heart. By the time she reached the park exit, sobs were shaking her body, the full weight of what she had done, what she had lost, crashing over her. But beneath the grief was a terrible certainty. She had made the only choice possible. She had protected Adrian from an impossible decision, protected her family from the Cross family's reach, protected her own heart from the inevitable pain of watching Adrian resent what loving her had cost him. Sometimes love meant letting go, even when every fiber of your being screamed to hold on. Hello, my beautiful souls. As we witness Celine's heartbreaking decision, I find myself wondering about the impossible choices love sometimes demands of us. Have you ever loved someone so deeply that you were willing to let them go to protect them, to spare them pain or sacrifice? What would you have done in Celine's position? Fight against all odds or walk away with your heart in pieces? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story is touching your soul, Please like and subscribe to stay with us on this journey. Sometimes the deepest love is shown not in what we hold on to, but in what we're brave enough to release. The Westmore Hotel's grand ballroom had been transformed into a vision of opulence for the annual Cross Foundation Gala. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over tables adorned with white orchids and gold accents. The city's elite moved through the space in designer gowns and bespoke suits, air-kissing and exchanging practice pleasantries while photographers captured carefully composed moments for tomorrow's society pages. For the past decade, Adrian had moved through these events with practiced ease, the perfect heir apparent, charming, controlled, and completely detached. Tonight he felt like an imposter in his own skin. 2 weeks had passed since Celine had walked away in Central Park. 2 weeks of going through the motions while feeling hollowed out inside. His father had wasted no time capitalizing on the breakup. The suitable Vivian Sinclair was at his side tonight, her hand possessively tucked into the crook of his arm, her diamond earrings catching the light with every calculated tilt of her head. The whispers had already begun. Rumors of an impending engagement announcement, of a merger between two of the city's most powerful families. Adrian had neither confirmed nor denied these rumors. He had simply existed, moving through board meetings and social obligations like a ghost of himself, trying to ignore the ache that had taken up permanent residence in his chest. "You could at least pretend to be enjoying yourself," Vivian murmured, her smile never faltering for the benefit of watching eyes. "Everyone's expecting a happy couple." Adrian glanced down at her, seeing not the woman beside him but all she represented. A life mapped out by others, connections valued over feelings, appearances prioritized over truth. Once, he had accepted this as his reality. Now, after Celine, it felt like a prison sentence. "I never agreed to be part of a couple, happy or otherwise," he replied quietly. Vivian's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Your father seems to think differently, as does mine." She nodded toward where Richard Cross and Harold Sinclair stood deep in conversation, occasionally glancing their way with satisfied expressions. "The announcement is set for after your speech. The press has been primed." Adrian felt something shift inside him, a quiet clarity cutting through weeks of fog and pain. "Is that what you want, Vivian? A marriage arranged by our fathers? A life lived for appearances?" For a brief moment, something vulnerable flickered across Vivian's perfect features, a glimpse of the woman beneath the polished exterior. Then her mask slipped back into place. "What I want is security, position, the life I was raised to expect." She studied him with cool assessment. "Your little rebellion is over, Adrian. It's time to accept your place in the world." Her words, so similar to his father's to his mother's, struck Adrian with unexpected force. How many generations of Cross heirs had surrendered their hearts for the sake of the family name? How many had lived half-lives, measuring success in acquisitions rather than joy? Across the room, his gaze caught on a familiar figure, and his heart stuttered in his chest. Celine stood near the entrance, stunning in a simple emerald gown that complemented her warm brown skin. She wasn't supposed to be here. The gala was strictly invitation-ly, the guest list personally approved by his mother. As if sensing his thoughts, Vivian followed his gaze. "Ah, your gallery girl. I invited her." Adrian turned to her in shock. "You what?" Vivian's smile was cold. "I thought she should witness your return to reality. Consider it closure." She patted his arm condescendingly. "Don't worry. She won't make a scene. She's far too dignified for that." The calculated cruelty of the gesture ignited something in Adrian, not just anger, but a fierce clarity about what truly mattered. Before he could respond, his father was at his side, clapping a hand on his shoulder. "It's time for your speech, son," Richard said, his tone brooking no argument. "The announcement has been added to your notes. Make us proud." As Adrian moved toward the podium, he felt as if he were standing at a crossroads. Behind him lay the path he had always followed: duty, family expectations, a life of privilege and emptiness. Ahead, uncertainty, but also the possibility of something real, something true. The room quieted as he took his place at the microphone. Hundreds of expectant faces turned toward him. His prepared speech, filled with platitudes about the Foundation's work and the importance of tradition, sat before him. At the back of the room, Celine stood perfectly still, her expression carefully neutral despite the pain evident in her eyes. "Ladies and gentlemen," Adrian began, his voice steady despite the chaos in his chest, "I stand before you tonight expected to announce an engagement that would strengthen the Cross Empire." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. His father's expression hardened from the front row. "Instead," Adrian continued, setting aside his notes, "I'm here to tell you that I've spent 32 years building a fortune while bankrupting my soul." The room fell silent. Cameras flashed. Celine's eyes widened. "3 months ago, I met a woman who showed me that true wealth isn't measured in property portfolios or stock options. It's measured in courage, in integrity, in love." His father rose from his seat, face thunderous. "Adrian, that's enough." But Adrian couldn't stop now. "My entire life I was taught that everything, even who I loved, must serve the family's reputation. I was taught that certain relationships were complicated, that loving a black woman would damage our brand." Gasps echoed through the ballroom. Celine's hand flew to her mouth. "Tonight, I'm choosing love over legacy." Adrian stepped away from the podium, his gaze never leaving Celine. "I'm choosing the woman who taught me that the most valuable thing we possess isn't what we own, it's who we become when we're brave enough to be seen." He extended his hand toward her across the shocked silence. "Celine Parker, I love you. And if you'll have me, I'll spend the rest of my life proving that you're the best decision I ever made." The room erupted in chaos. His father shouted. Cameras flashed frantically. But all Adrian could see was Celine, tears streaming down her face as she moved toward him through the crowd. For an eternal moment, he feared she would turn away, that the damage was too great, the barriers too high. Then she was before him, her eyes shining with a mixture of disbelief and hope. "Adrian," she whispered, "do you know what you're doing? What you're giving up?" He took her hands in his, uncaring of the spectacle they had become. "I'm not giving up anything that matters. I'm choosing what's real over what's expected. I'm choosing you. Your family will either accept my choice or lose me entirely." His voice was firm, his decision made. "I won't let them threaten you or your family again. I won't let anyone tell me who I'm allowed to love." Richard Cross pushed through the crowd, his face contorted with rage. "Adrian, you will not throw away generations of legacy for this infatuation. If you walk out that door with her, you walk away from everything. Your position, your inheritance, your name." Adrian met his father's gaze steadily. "Then I'll build something new, something better." He turned back to Celine. "If you'll stand with me." The vulnerability in his question, this powerful man asking for her partnership, not as an heir or a CEO but simply as himself, moved Celine deeply. She thought of her parents, who had taught her that love was worth fighting for, of her own fears and doubts, now challenged by Adrian's courage. "Yes," she said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "Yes, I'll stand with you." Adrian's smile was radiant as he brought her hand to his lips. Then, in a gesture that would grace the cover of every tabloid and society page the next morning, he led her through the stunned crowd toward the exit. Victoria Cross stepped into their path, her perfect composure cracking for the first time in Adrian's memory. "Adrian, please. Think about what you're doing. The scandal, the damage to the family name." "I am thinking, Mother." Clearly, for the first time, Adrian's voice was gentle but firm. "I hope someday you'll understand that love isn't a liability. It's the only thing that matters." As they reached the doors, Adrian paused, turning back to the room of shocked faces and furious whispers. The Cross Foundation's New Arts Initiative will continue as planned, under the direction of Celine Parker. Those who value inclusion and authentic representation are welcome to continue their support. Those who don't, well, there are plenty of other galas to attend. With that parting shot, business and personal values aligned in one clear statement, Adrian and Celine walked out of the ballroom hand in hand. In the quiet of the hotel lobby, away from the cameras and whispers, Adrian pulled Celine close. "Are you okay?" She laughed softly, the sound caught between tears and joy. "I don't know. Think so. That was dramatic," he offered with a rueful smile. "Brave," she corrected, reaching up to touch his face. "And terrifying. And wonderful." Her expression grew serious. "Adrian, I need you to be sure. What you just did, the consequences, will be significant," he acknowledged. "My father doesn't make empty threats. But Celine, these past 2 weeks without you, I realized that none of it means anything if I can't be true to myself. If I can't be with the woman I love." The simple declaration, "the woman I love," sent warmth spreading through Celine's chest. "I love you too," she whispered. "I tried not to. I tried to be sensible and practical and selfless. But I love you, Adrian Cross, with or without your family name." His kiss was tender, a promise sealed between them. When they broke apart, both were smiling despite the uncertainty that lay ahead. "So," Celine asked, a hint of mischief entering her eyes, "what does a disinherited billionaire do for his second act?" Adrian laughed, the sound free and genuine. "I have no idea. But I'm looking forward to figuring it out, with you." Hand in hand, they walked out of the hotel into the warm spring night, leaving behind the weight of expectations and stepping into a future of their own making. Behind them, the scandal was already spreading through the ballroom like wildfire. Ahead, challenges awaited: family disapproval, public scrutiny, the practical realities of building a new life. But in this moment, walking together beneath the stars, they had chosen love over legacy. And that made them the richest people in the city. The headlines were merciless in the days following the gala. Cross heir chooses love over legacy. Billionaire defies family for forbidden romance. Adrian Cross walks away from fortune for gallery curator. True to his word, Richard Cross had acted swiftly. Adrian's access to company accounts was revoked. His position as CEO of the North American division was terminated. His penthouse, owned by Cross Properties, was no longer his home. What Richard hadn't anticipated was Adrian's quiet preparation. In the 2 weeks following Celine's heartbreaking decision in the park, Adrian had been transferring personal assets, liquidating investments, and securing his own financial foundation separate from the Cross empire. He wasn't destitute, far from it, but the billions he had been heir to were now beyond his reach. "Are you sure you're okay with this?" Celine asked one evening as they sat on the balcony of the Brooklyn apartment they now shared. It was smaller than his penthouse but filled with warmth. Her books, his records, fresh flowers in simple vases, and art they had chosen together adorning the walls. Adrian looked up from his laptop, where he had been working on business plans for his new venture. "With what? Living in Brooklyn? I'm discovering it has distinct advantages." His smile was teasing as he pulled her onto his lap. Celine laughed but persisted. "With all of it. Tabloids, the gossip, starting over." Adrian's expression grew thoughtful. "I won't pretend it's been easy. But every morning I wake up next to you, and I know I made the right choice." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "For the first time in my life, I'm building something that's truly mine. Not an extension of my father's vision or the Cross legacy." His new company, Phoenix Ventures, focused on ethical investments in underserved communities, providing capital for small businesses, affordable housing developments, and arts organizations that larger firms overlooked. It was challenging work, requiring Adrian to prove himself beyond his family name, to earn trust through actions rather than inheritance. The learning curve had been steep. There were nights of doubt, moments when the weight of his decision pressed heavily. But there was also a freedom he had never known, to make mistakes, to learn from them, to define success on his own terms. For Celine, the aftermath of the gala had brought its own challenges and triumphs. As promised, she had taken leadership of the Cross Foundation's arts initiative, now renamed the Phoenix Arts Fund after Adrian's separation from the family business. Under her direction, the fund had become a powerful force for change in the art world, providing platforms for voices long marginalized. Her parents, initially concerned about the public scrutiny their daughter now faced, had become Adrian's strongest supporters. James Parker's quiet wisdom and Diana's practical compassion offered a model of family that Adrian had never experienced, one built on love rather than obligation, on support rather than expectation. "My mother called again," Celine mentioned, her head resting against Adrian's shoulder. "She wants to know if we're coming for Sunday dinner." Adrian smiled. Sunday dinners at the Parker home had become a cherished ritual. Simple meals filled with conversation, laughter, and a sense of belonging he had spent his life searching for. "I wouldn't miss it. Your father promised to show me those old jazz records he found." The easy domesticity of their life together, sharing meals, building traditions, supporting each other's dreams, was a revelation to Adrian. Wealth had given him access to the finest restaurants, the most exclusive clubs, homes in the most desirable locations. But it had never given him this sense of peace, of rightness, of being truly seen and loved. 6 months after the gala, Adrian and Celine were married in a small ceremony in the Brooklyn Botanic Garden. There were no society photographers, no business associates attending for strategic purposes, just friends who had stood by them, colleagues who respected their work, and the Parker family surrounding them with love. Richard and Victoria Cross did not attend, their silence a pointed statement. Adrian had extended the invitation without expectation, understanding that bridges burned so publicly would take time to rebuild, if they ever could be. The absence stung, but it was overshadowed by the joy of the day. As Celine walked toward him in a simple gown of ivory silk, wildflowers in her hair instead of diamonds, Adrian knew with bone-deep certainty that he had found true wealth in her love. Their vows, written together over late-night conversations and early morning coffees, spoke not of possession or perfection but of partnership and growth. "I choose you not for what you can give me or what you represent, but for who you are and who we become together. I promise to stand beside you in challenge and celebration, to listen with an open heart, to grow with you through all the seasons of our life together." As they spoke these words before their chosen family, something profound settled between them, a foundation stronger than fortune, more lasting than legacy. In the year that followed, both their professional lives flourished in unexpected ways. Phoenix Ventures gained recognition for its innovative approach to community investment. The Phoenix Arts Fund launched careers and exhibitions that challenged the status quo. Together, Adrian and Celine were creating a new kind of influence, one based on values rather than valuables. There were still whispers in certain circles, still raised eyebrows at the mention of the Cross heir who had walked away from billions for love. But increasingly, there was also respect for the man who had proven himself beyond his name, for the woman whose vision was transforming the cultural landscape, for the couple who had chosen authenticity over advantage. One evening, as they walked hand in hand through a gallery featuring artists supported by their fund, a young reporter approached them for a statement. "Mr. Cross, do you ever regret your decision? The fortune you gave up?" Adrian looked at Celine, at the life they had built together, at the work that now filled their days with purpose rather than obligation. His answer was simple but profound. "I didn't give up a fortune. I found one." 5 years later, the garden behind Adrian and Celine's brownstone bloomed with late spring flowers, their colors vibrant against the weathered brick. Laughter filled the air as 3-year-old Zora Cross Parker chased butterflies across the grass, her dark curls bouncing with each determined step. "Careful, sweetheart," Celine called, smiling as their daughter tumbled and immediately picked herself up again, resilient and determined, a perfect blend of both her parents. Adrian watched from the patio where he was arranging a tray of lemonade and cookies, his heart full at the sight of his family. The past 5 years had brought challenges and triumphs in equal measure. Phoenix Ventures had grown into a respected firm known for its ethical investments and community impact. Celine's work with the Arts Fund had transformed opportunities for underrepresented artists across the country. Together, they had built a life rich in purpose, connection, and love. The doorbell rang, interrupting his thoughts. Adrian exchanged a glance with Celine, both recognizing the significance of this afternoon. With a reassuring nod from his wife, Adrian went to answer the door. Richard and Victoria Cross stood on the threshold, impeccably dressed as always but with an unfamiliar hesitancy in their posture. 5 years had passed since the night Adrian had walked away from his inheritance. 5 years of strained phone calls, tentative holiday cards, and the slow, painful process of redefining family on new terms. "You came," Adrian said simply, stepping back to welcome them inside. Victoria's gaze moved past him, searching. "Is she in the garden with Celine?" Adrian led them through the home he and Celine had lovingly restored. Warm, welcoming, filled with art and books and photographs documenting their life together. As they stepped onto the patio, Zora looked up from her butterfly chase, her curious eyes, so like Adrian's, studying the newcomers. Celine rose from her garden chair, her expression guarded but civil. "Zora," she called gently, "come meet your grandparents." The little girl approached cautiously, hiding partially behind her mother's legs while peeking out at the strangers. Victoria knelt down, her usual perfect posture softening as she came to eye level with her granddaughter. "Hello, Zora," she said, her voice gentler than Adrian had heard it in years. "I'm your grandmother." Zora studied her with solemn intensity before asking, "Do you like butterflies?" A genuine smile, perhaps the first Adrian had seen from his mother in decades, transformed Victoria's face. "I do. Very much." "Me too," Zora declared, her shyness evaporating. "I'll show you the yellow ones. They're my favorite." She reached for Victoria's hand without hesitation, the innocent gesture bridging years of estrangement in an instant. As Victoria allowed herself to be led to the butterfly bush, Richard remained on the patio, his expression complex as he surveyed the life his son had built without him. "Your company is doing well," he said finally. The West Side development project was impressive. Coming from Richard Cross, this was tantamount to effusive praise. Adrian nodded, accepting the olive branch for what it was. "Thank you. We're proud of it." An awkward silence fell, years of hurt and pride creating a chasm not easily crossed. Then Richard reached into his jacket pocket, withdrawing an envelope. "This is for Zora," he said, handing it to Adrian. "A trust fund. Not contingent on anything. No conditions, no expectations. Just a grandfather's gift." Adrian accepted the envelope, recognizing the significance of what his father was offering. Not just financial security for Zora, but an acknowledgement of her place in the family, regardless of the circumstances of her parents' relationship. "Thank you," he said simply. "She'll appreciate it someday. But you know what she'd appreciate more right now? Getting to know her grandfather." Richard's gaze moved to where Zora was now showing Victoria a caterpillar with enthusiastic commentary. Something softened in his expression, a glimpse of the man beneath the businessman, the father beneath the CEO. "I'd like that," he admitted quietly. As the afternoon progressed, the tension gradually eased. There were still moments of awkwardness, still careful navigation of sensitive topics. But there were also glimpses of possibility. Richard listening with genuine interest as Celine described her latest exhibition, Victoria laughing as Zora crowned her with a dandelion wreath, the four adults sharing a meal without the weight of expectations hanging over them. When it was time for them to leave, Zora insisted on hugs, her innocent affection offering a path forward that pride and hurt had long obscured. At the door, Victoria paused, turning to Celine with uncharacteristic vulnerability. "Thank you for today." She glanced at Adrian, at the home they had created together. "For making him happy." "I see that now." Celine nodded, accepting the acknowledgement with grace. "He makes me happy too." As the elder Crosses departed, Adrian and Celine stood in the doorway, Zora between them holding both their hands. "Do you think they'll come back?" Celine asked softly. Adrian watched his parents' car disappear down the street, thinking of the small moments of connection that had punctuated the afternoon. "Yes," he said with quiet certainty. "I think they will." That night, as they tucked Zora into bed, her eyes heavy with the excitement of the day, she asked sleepily, "Are Grandma and Grandpa coming for my birthday?" Adrian and Celine exchanged glances over their daughter's head, a world of understanding passing between them. "We'll invite them," Celine promised. "And we'll see." Later, as they sat on their small balcony beneath the stars, Adrian took Celine's hand in his. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" "For walking back to me that night at the gala. For believing we could build something real. For showing me what true wealth looks like." Celine smiled, leaning into his embrace. "We built it together." In the quiet of the evening, surrounded by the life they had created, they both knew the truth. Love had not just transformed two people, it had begun to heal a family. It had broken down walls built over generations. It had rewritten rules long accepted as immutable. And in doing so, it had redefined wealth in the most profound way possible. True riches, they had discovered, were never kept in bank accounts or measured in acquisitions. They were found in the courage to choose authenticity over expectation, in the joy of building something meaningful together, and in the legacy of love they were creating. One day, one choice, one moment of connection at a time. Hello, my beautiful souls. As our story finds its resolution, I'm sitting here with a full heart, thinking of each of you. Isn't it remarkable how love can transform an arrangement into something authentic and true? I wonder about the arrangements in your own life. The jobs, the obligations, the chance meetings, that blossomed into connections you never expected. Life rarely follows the paths we imagine, does it? Whether you're currently walking through shadows like Adrian once did, standing guard over your heart like Celine, or learning to trust again after disappointment, know that you're not alone on the journey. If this story touched something in your soul, please share it with someone whose heart might need its message tonight. Tap that subscribe button to join our family of hopeful hearts and romantic spirits. I create these stories because your emotions and experiences matter deeply to me. Until we meet again in our next chapter, remember that sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin with someone simply being brave enough to stay when it would be easier to walk away.